Hey, happy Friday everyone. I hope you're all having an amazing day so far preparing for the weekend. There's a lot of things that have been going on for Star Wars for a very long time now. We do know that Jon and Dave have great ambitions and goals, and they're so passionately driven for the Ahsoka Tano series as well as Ahsoka Season 2. And let's not forget about the Mandalorian Season 4. Everything is going to come together because all those projects, just for starters, are going to have zero influence by Kathleen Kennedy so far. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. And without further ado, let's get right down to this. Now, we do know that everything related to Disney CEO Bob Iger is that he is all about really trying to create his own legacy, right? He really wants to create his own Star Wars legacy, so to speak, that's going to be left behind because he doesn't really plan on staying at Disney for all that long. In fact, the overall Disney executives and the board really are planning to get him out of there by 2024, but that doesn't make much of a difference because Bob Iger himself wants to leave by next year anyways, for starters. So it's really all a race, right? It's all a matter of whether or not Iger is going to create a positive legacy or a negative legacy before he either gets to leave or if the board catches up to him and gets rid of him with a new replacement before that even happens. But I really have to say one thing here. What's interesting about what's going on with Lucasfilm right now has a lot to do with one big call by Bob Iger, and this has a lot to do with everything related to the overall structure of the company. Alright, so right now Disney and Lucasfilm are beginning to completely restructure Lucasfilm as a company. The big plan by Disney CEO Bob Iger and the executives is to completely reset Lucasfilm. This is planned to take place over the next 2 years leading into 2025 to ensure that Star Wars thrives and survives. This plan will consist of many things that will happen. Jon and Dave will be taking over specific departments and progressively gaining more privileges at the company every single 2 months. George Lucas is planned to become the head of the Lucasfilm Story Group by next year in 2024, where he will also be gaining some privileges at the company under Jon and Dave as well. Now, many employees at Lucasfilm will be replaced with more passionate creators and employees and/or staff to stay true to what Star Wars really stands for by George's philosophy. Now, let's be more clear about this before I move on to the next big segment, is that there's a lot of Lucasfilm employees and staff that really have no respect for George Lucas's treatment of Star Wars, his vision of the overall franchise, and Disney's beginning to realize that they need employees, staff, and creators that value what George Lucas created throughout the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, and to really kind of just respect all of that. Now, when you look at stuff like this, the fact that they want to turn the company upside down and really kind of bring it back on its feet, it's really a big thing that's going to happen. The fact that they have to go through a tough phase first and get rid of all these employees and replace them with new ones and really just restructure the company for the better. And that's going to be the tough phase. But once it's fully established, from going upside down and really kind of stabilizing itself essentially, is when things are truly going to go in a better path. Now, given that this is, like I said before, it's going to take place over the course of the next 2 years, it's going to be a progressive thing in segments, and a lot of it has already been happening. Jon and Dave themselves have been getting a lot of promotions over at Lucasfilm, gaining, a lot of privileges over at the company, a lot of which has to do with the budgeting and the overall casting decisions of specific projects, stuff like that. In fact, a big part of this had a lot to do with Dave Filoni getting the opportunity to make his own Star Wars movie, along with Jon Favreau. So, to the next thing here, this will, of course, include the art departments and even other members of the story group getting replaced. Both Jon and Dave are planned to become major players in the story group by the hands of Bob Iger, allowing this to happen by 2024. Iger's plan is to also create more teams for specific Star Wars shows and movies that will work separately in different ways than how it's handled as of right now. The plan by Iger is to actually begin laying off Lucasfilm employees beginning by this fall to kickstart the Lucasfilm reset essentially. John and Dave are planned to actually get another promotion by this July that will give them more leadership skills essentially and roles at the company to really steer Star Wars in a more proper path that holds a stable vision in place. So again, the fact that John and Dave are going to be getting more promotions every 2 months is really something to look forward to, is that you're going to have a lot of great things to look forward to when it comes to how Star Wars is going to be handled, because John and Dave are going to gain more and more control over at this company as we go throughout the rest of this year, leading into 2024 and beyond. So that's one reason why I think a lot of fans should remain a little bit more optimistic about where Star Wars is heading. You know, we have a lot of good and bad happening right now, let's be honest. There's a lot of negative and positive happening with Star Wars. Everything related to the whole Kathleen Kennedy dynamic isn't so great. But the whole John and Dave dynamic and Tony Gilroy, as well as George Lucas, I think is something to truly be very excited about. Moving on. Now, this big move was all agreed upon between many of the Disney board members and the executives in a sudden move to improve Star Wars as fast as possible within the next 2 years. The ultimate plan on top of this, and the icing of the cake here, is to replace Kathleen Kennedy as Lucasfilm president by this August, which is wholly relying on the performance of Indiana Jones 5, where it stands currently. And we talked about this just earlier, that Indy 5 really is the major player, or the overall influence on whether or not she's going to stay at this company or not as president. Now, regardless, her contract does end by 2024, and Disney does not want her to renew that, regardless. They want her out in any scenario. They don't want her to continue. They're not really all that confident in Indy 5 to begin with, let alone Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, so it is going to be interesting to see exactly where that's all going to lead. But moving on from this, let's focus on the positive. You got John and Dave taking over a lot of different departments that will be settled by 2024. You have them getting multiple promotions every single 2 months. George is planned to become the head of the Lucasfilm story group, and John and Dave will eventually become a part of that heavily. So there's a lot of great things coming out of this, including the fact that there's going to be more passionately driven employees and creators coming on board. I think, at the end of the day, this big reset for the company was long overdue. This is something that Disney needed to do after The Last Jedi. Let's be real about this. This was something that needed to happen in 2018, post The Last Jedi release, and it's just been a very long process. They've had to live and learn the hard way, essentially. They saw what happened with Solo, Kenobi, Boba Fett, and what's going to happen with the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. You know, that's going to be the latest lesson for them. So overall, guys, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. And I will catch you guys next time.
Night to moon, we hear them moans again.